The snow falling on Christmas Eve looked less like magic and more like ash covering a crime scene. My son and his wife thought draining my bank account was their cleverest move. But watching them try to gaslight me into silence was their fatal mistake. I simply asked where my money went, and they declared war. They have no idea that the fragile old woman they mocked is actually holding the detonator that will level their entire life. My name is Eleanor S. Hart. I am 58 years old, and until my knees gave out and the company downsized, I spent 3 decades managing the archives at Northglow Claims Services. I know how to spot a missing page in a stack of 1,000. I know how to track a paper trail until it leads to a person who thinks they have covered their tracks. Yet, as I drove my rusting sedan through the falling snow towards Briar Hollow that Christmas Eve, I did not realize I was driving into a crime scene. My apartment in Ridgeport smells of old heating ducts and lemon polish. My son's house smells of cinnamon sticks and money. Caleb moved to this gated community 3 years ago, shortly after marrying Madeline. Since then, I have become less of a mother and more of an obligation, a box to be checked off on a holiday to-do list. When I stepped into the foyer, the heat hit me first, followed by Madeline's voice. She floated toward me in a dress that likely cost more than my monthly rent. "Eleanor, we were worried you got lost in the storm," Maddie said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She took my coat with 2 fingers, as if the fabric might stain her hands. "Here, let me take that. Go join the others. Caleb is pouring drinks." I watched her hang my coat in the closet. Her back turned to me for just a moment too long. I felt a prickle of unease, the kind I used to get when a file was mislabeled on purpose. I shook it off and walked into the living room. The house was decorated like a magazine spread. On the coffee table sat a massive, crystal reindeer centerpiece, glittering under the recessed lighting. Maddie followed me in, beaming as she gestured to it. "Do you love it?" she asked, linking her arm through Caleb's. "I just picked it up today. It was a total splurge, but I couldn't resist." Caleb looked tired. He smiled at me, but his eyes darted away. "Hi, Mum? Glad you made it?" My phone buzzed in my pocket. I usually ignore it, but the vibration was persistent. I pulled it out and saw a notification from my bank app. Transaction authorized. $350. The Gilded Bow. I looked at the crystal reindeer. I looked at Maddie's triumphant smile. I looked at the time on the alert. It was authorized 12 minutes ago, exactly when Maddie had taken my coat. My chest tightened. I reached for my purse, which I had kept over my shoulder, and opened the clasp. My wallet was there, but it sat at a different angle than I always keep it. I checked the card slot. The debit card was there, but it was upside down. I felt the blood drain from my face. I needed to be sure. "Caleb," I said, my voice steady despite the thumping in my ears. "Can I speak to you in the kitchen? Just for a second." Maddie's smile faltered. "Is everything okay?" "Eleanor, dinner is almost ready. Just a moment," I said. Caleb sighed, the sound of a man who knew a storm was coming and hoped to sleep through it. He followed me into the pristine white kitchen. The noise of the party faded behind the swinging door. "Mom, please," Caleb whispered, rubbing his temples. "Not tonight. Maddie has been cooking for 2 days. Don't start anything." "I am not starting anything," I said, holding up my phone. "Caleb, there is a charge on my card, $350, at a store called the Gilded Bow. That reindeer in there. Where did Maddie get it?" Caleb froze. He looked at the oven, the floor, anywhere but me. She bought it with her own money. Mum, you're confused. You probably spent it on groceries or bills and forgot. You know how you get lately. I do not forget $300. Caleb. I snapped. My card was in my wallet. Maddie took my coat. And now, stop. He hissed, his voice hard. You are accusing my wife of stealing on Christmas. You are tired. You are imagining things. Just go sit down and eat. He turned and walked out, leaving me standing next to the recycling bin. I was shaking. Was I crazy? Did I buy something and forget I looked down into the bin? Right on top of an empty wine bottle was a crumpled ball of thermal paper. My instincts from Northglow took over. I reached in and smoothed it out. It was a receipt from the Gilded Bow. The customer name had been torn off the top, ripped away with intention. But the transaction code was there, and the timestamp. 6:45 p.m. I had arrived at 6:40. I stared at the paper. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a script. They were painting me as the forgetful, senile old woman so they could justify using my money. If I complained, I was confused. If I shouted, I was unstable. I walked back into the living room. Caleb was laughing at something a guest said. Maddie was pouring wine. They looked so normal, so happy. My phone buzzed again. I looked down. A new notification. Transfer initiated $1. It was a test. Someone was checking if the connection to my savings account was live. They were not done. They were just getting started. I looked at my son, laughing with a glass of scotch in his hand, and I realized he was not just avoiding my gaze. He was waiting for me to break. The morning sun on Christmas Day did not bring clarity. It brought a headache that throbbed behind my eyes like a second heartbeat. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, my phone screen glowing with the evidence of my own erasure. The bank statement was updated. There were 2 withdrawals, $200 each, both taken from an ATM at a gas station 20 minutes from Caleb's house. The timestamp read 11:30 at night. I closed my eyes. At 11:30. I had been asleep in this room. My coat, however, had been downstairs in the hall closet, the same closet Maddie had insisted on using. I walked downstairs. The smell of roasted ham and expensive coffee filled the air, a sickening perfume over the rot I knew was underneath. Caleb and Maddie were in the living room, surrounded by torn wrapping paper. Maddie, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the holiday jazz playing on the speaker. She looked up, a half-opened gift in her lap. Merry Christmas. Eleanor, did you sleep well? My debit card was used last night, I said, holding up my phone. $400 in cash, taken while I was sleeping upstairs. The room went silent. Caleb put down his coffee mug. Mum, he started, his tone warning. It was taken from a gas station on Route 9. I continued, staring directly at Maddie. I do not have my car keys. I did not leave this house. But my card did. Maddie did not flinch. She did not look surprised. Instead, she let out a long, shaky sigh and turned to Caleb. See, she said, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. I told you. I told you she would find a way to blame me. It is starting again. Caleb, I am not blaming anyone without cause. I said, my hands shaking at my sides. I am stating facts. The card was in my coat. You hung up my coat. Caleb stood up abruptly. He crossed the room, grabbed my arm, and pulled me toward his home office. He shut the door behind us, the lock clicking like a sentence. "Mom, please," he hissed, running a hand over his face. "You are going to ruin Christmas. Do you have any idea how hard Maddie worked for this? She stole from me." "Caleb," I said. "Look at the statement." "You are confused," he snapped. "Just like you were confused about the time, Mom. Look." He pulled out his phone. Maddie must have sent it to him moments ago. It was a screenshot of a text message conversation. The contact name at the top said, "Mom." The message read, "Need cash for bills. Can you lend me some will payback?" I stared at the screen. The air left my lungs. I did not write that. I said, "It came from your number," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a pitying whisper. "Maddie said you asked her last night. She didn't want to embarrass you. So she gave you the cash. And you must have forgotten that you asked." "Look at the text." "Caleb?" I said, pointing at the screen with a trembling finger. "It says you instead of you. It has no period at the end. I spent 30 years correcting files at Northglow. Have I ever, in my entire life, written a sentence without punctuation?" Caleb looked at the phone, then back at me. He saw it. I knew he saw it. But admitting it meant admitting his wife was a predator. Autocorrect changes things. "Mom," he said, looking away. "You are tired. Just let it go." "For me." "Let it go?" I asked. $400 is my grocery money for the month. I will give you the money," he shouted, then lowered his voice. "I will write you a check. Just stop accusing her." He opened the door and walked back out. I followed him, feeling like a ghost in my own life. "Check the cameras." I said to the room, "You have a Ring doorbell. If I went out to an ATM, or if someone left with my card, it is on the video." Maddie was pouring champagne. She paused, the bottle hovering over a flute. "Oh, Eleanor. Honestly," she said, offering a sad smile to the room. "The camera broke last week. Remember?" "Caleb. We talked about calling the technician." "Right," Caleb mumbled, drinking his coffee too fast. "It's been down since Tuesday." I stood there, surrounded by their expensive furniture and their performative joy. They had closed every exit. If I screamed, I was the crazy old woman ruining the holiday. If I stayed silent, I accepted the lie. I turned and walked to the downstairs bathroom. I locked the door and gripped the cold porcelain of the sink. I looked at myself in the mirror. My grey hair was messy. My eyes were wide and red-rimmed. I looked exactly like the unstable, fragile woman they wanted me to be. They wanted a villain fine. They wanted a senile old woman who could not be held responsible for her actions. I took a deep breath. If they want to make me crazy, I whispered to my reflection, then I will be crazy. But they have no idea how dangerous crazy can be. I left Caleb's house before brunch was served. I told them I had a migraine, which was only half a lie. The real pain was not in my head, but in the hollow center of my chest, where my trust used to be. I drove 20 minutes to Hollis Diner on the edge of town, a place with vinyl seats taped together with duct tape and coffee that tasted like battery acid. It was the only place open, and more importantly, it was the only place where no one looked at me like I was a charity case. I set up my old laptop on the Formica table. It is a heavy, outdated machine. But it has one virtue: I never use it for anything but taxes and banking. I connected to the diner's slow Wi-Fi and navigated to my bank's portal. My hands were steady now. I was no longer Eleanor the mother. I was Eleanor the archivist. I was looking for a discrepancy in the file. I logged in immediately. A red banner flashed across the top of the dashboard. Security alert, attempted addition of trusted device blocked. I clicked the details. The attempt had happened at 7 o'clock this morning. The device was an iPhone 14 Pro. I own a 6-year-old Samsung. They had tried to clone my access, but they hit the wall of my two-factor authentication. The code had gone to my flip phone, which was sitting silently in my purse at the time. I dialed the number on the back of my debit card. It took 10 minutes of navigating robotic menus before I got a human being. "This is Eleanor Hart," I said. My voice flat. "I want to freeze my accounts. All of them. And I want to know about a change of address." The representative typed for a moment. "I see a request was processed 10 days ago." "Ms. Hart? We received a signed form to redirect physical statements. 10 days. Read me the new address," I said. "It is a post office box at the Pack and Ship Center on 4th Street, the agent said. My stomach turned over. That was not Caleb's house. That was a commercial mail drop in a strip mall. If they had redirected the mail to their house, I might have believed it was a misguided attempt to help me manage my bills. But a secret P.O. box, that is concealment, that is intent. I hung up and dialed Darla McKenna. Darla used to be the internal auditor at Northglow before she retired to raise alpacas. She has a mind like a steel trap and a cynical streak a mile wide. "Eleanor," she answered on the second ring. "It is Christmas. Unless you are calling to tell me you won the lottery, this better be good. Someone is testing my accounts." "Darla?" I said. I skipped the pleasantries. $1 transfer test, a P.O. box redirect, and 2 cash withdrawals while I was asleep. I could hear Darla shifting on the other end. The line went quiet for a moment. "The $1 ping?" Darla said, her voice losing its holiday cheer. "That is classic. They do that to verify the routing number works before they drain the primary balance. It usually bypasses the big fraud algorithms because the amount is so small. Who is the suspect?" "My family," I said. The word tasted like ash. "Do they have your passwords?" "No," I said. "I use a complex string." But I stopped. I reached into the pocket of the cardigan I had worn yesterday. My fingers brushed against a piece of stiff paper. It was a note Maddie had slipped into my pocket when I arrived, smiling that sweet, poisonous smile. "Just the Wi-Fi password and alarm code, Mom, so you don't have to ask." I pulled it out. Under the Wi-Fi code, there was a string of numbers she had written down, supposedly the gate code for the community. 1965-8. I stared at it. 1965. That was the year my first car was manufactured, the answer to my first security question. 88. The last 2 digits of my social security number. She had not given me information. She had been harvesting it. She must have asked me casual questions over wine weeks ago. "Mom, what was that old car you loved? Mom, remind me of the paperwork year." And I had answered, happy that someone was listening. Eleanor Darla asked, "Are you still there?" "They have the answers to my security questions," I whispered. Maddie wrote them down on a slip of paper she gave me, probably so she could remember them while she tried to hack in. She was building a profile. "Okay, listen to me," Darla said, her voice sharp and commanding. "Stop thinking about this as a family dispute. You need to pull your credit report. If they redirected the mail 10 days ago, They have had time to apply for new lines of credit in your name. Why, I asked. Why would they do this? Caleb makes good money. Greed does not need a reason, Eleanor. It just needs an opportunity. Darla said. And from what you are describing, that $1 transaction that wasn't just to check if the account was open. I looked at the screen, at the red alert, at the ghost of the money that used to be mine. What was it, I asked? It was a handshake, Darla said grimly. They are linking your account to an external one. Eleanor, this isn't petty theft. This is a hostile financial takeover. They are trying to become you. The offices of Hale and Quinton Legal were situated on the 4th floor of a brick building in downtown Ridgeport. The reception area smelled of laser printer toner and industrial carpet cleaner. It was a sterile, unforgiving environment, which was exactly what I needed. I did not want tea and sympathy. I wanted a weapon. Martin Hale was younger than I expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with a hairline that was receding and eyes that missed nothing. He did not waste time with pleasantries after I laid out the bank statements, the blocked transaction logs, and the crumpled receipt from the trash. This is not just theft, Ms. Hart, Martin said, leaning back in his leather chair. He tented his fingers. This falls under the umbrella of financial elder abuse. But the pattern you are describing, the gaslighting about your memory, the staged public confusion, that is specific? Specific to what I asked, gripping the arms of the chair. It is the prelude to a capacity challenge, Martin said. His voice was dry, devoid of emotion. If they can convince a court that you are mentally unfit, that you are forgetting transactions, sending erratic texts, losing track of time, they can apply for conservatorship. Once they have that, they do not need to steal your money. The law will hand it to them to manage for your own good. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine, colder than the winter wind outside. My son would not go that far, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. He is weak, but he is not malicious. Martin turned his monitor so I could see it. He typed a few keystrokes into a database search bar. I took the liberty of checking the county probate filings before our meeting. Martin said, "It is public record, though most people never look." He pointed to a line item dated 2 days prior, in re-guardianship of Eleanor S. Hart. Petitioner Caleb Hart. Status pending emergency review. The air left the room. I stared at my name on the screen. They filed it. I whispered. They filed it before Christmas dinner. They filed for an emergency temporary guardianship, Martin corrected. They claimed you are an immediate danger to your own financial solvency. The hearing date would be sent by mail. I assume you never received it. They redirected my mail, I said. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They sent it to a P.O. box so I would miss the hearing. I would not show up to defend myself, and the judge would grant it by default. Exactly, Martin said. This was not an impulse crime. Eleanor, this was a siege. He pulled a fresh legal pad toward him. We have very little time. We need to secure your assets immediately, but we must do it quietly. If we freeze everything now, they will know you are onto them, and they will accelerate the court date. We need to let them think they are winning while we move the battlefield. How I asked. We create a revocable living trust today, Martin explained, his pen moving fast across the paper. We move the deed to your house, your retirement accounts, and your primary savings into the trust. I will act as the trustee for now. That locks the assets behind a legal wall they cannot touch, even with a guardianship order. and the bank account I asked. That is the trap, Martin said, looking up with a grim smile. We leave your primary checking account active. We leave a modest amount of money in it, maybe $2,000, enough to be tempting. We let them access it. We let them log in. We let them transfer the money. You want me to let them rob me? I want them to commit a felony wire fraud transaction while the assets are under active monitoring. Martin said, once the real money is safe in the trust, that checking account becomes a honeypot. When they take the bait, we will have the IP addresses, the device IDs, and the bank logs. It will be undeniable proof of theft, not mismanagement by a confused old woman. He slid a stack of documents across the desk. We also need to revoke your current power of attorney and update your healthcare directives. Immediately. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. The grief I had felt in the kitchen on Christmas Eve was gone, burned away by the heat of this betrayal. Caleb had not just invited me to dinner. He had invited me to my own execution. One more thing, Martin said, his expression hardening. Do not confront them alone. If they realize the mail redirect has been discovered, or if the bank locks them out again, they may escalate. If there is any physical aggression, you go straight to the emergency room and you get it documented. Do you understand? I signed the last page of the trust agreement. The ink was dark and permanent. I understand, I said. Martin gathered the papers. We can stop this. Eleanor. We can get the guardianship petition thrown out. We can force them to settle. I stood up and buttoned my cheap wool coat. I looked at the lawyer, but I was seeing Caleb's face as he lied to me in his kitchen. I do not want a settlement, Mr. Hale, I said quietly. And I do not need them to apologize. I need them to confess. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the kind of silence that usually comforted me, but now felt heavy with ghosts. My eyes drifted to a framed photograph on the mantel. It was Caleb at 7 years old, missing a front tooth, holding a plastic trophy from a soccer game he had spent mostly sitting in the grass. I remembered the cost of those cleats. I remembered eating toast for dinner for a week so he could have the uniform that matched the other boys. I remembered the nights I worked late filing claims at Northglow, my back aching, telling myself that every hour was an investment in his future. I had raised him to be strong. I had raised him to be honest. Somewhere along the line, between his business degree and his promotion to regional sales manager, those lessons had been overwritten by a desperate need to belong. Caleb was no longer the boy who shared his lunch. He was a man terrified of being seen as ordinary. He wore his status like armor, and Maddie was the one who polished it. I realized then that Maddie did not just want my money. Money was useful, but it was finite. What Maddie wanted was to control the history of our family. She needed to turn me into a burden. If I was the senile, chaotic mother who ruined holidays and forgot conversations, then Caleb did not have to feel guilty about cutting me off. She was offering him a moral exit strategy. She was giving him permission to abandon me by rewriting me as a villain. My old flip phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up, expecting another spam call. It was a text message from a number I had not saved but recognized immediately. It was Linda, the neighbor who lived directly across the street from Caleb. Eleanor. I hope you are okay. I heard shouting on Christmas Eve. I saw that wife of his carrying a heavy satchel to her car right after you arrived. It looked like she was in a hurry. Just thought you should know. I stared at the screen. A satchel. To the car. I called Darla back immediately. I have a witness, I said. my voice steady. Maddie moved documents out of the house the moment I walked in the door. We need a timeline. Eleanor, Darla said, her voice crackling over the speaker. Reconstruct the night, minute by minute. I opened my laptop again. I pulled up the traffic camera data from the Department of Transportation website. It is public information if you know where to look. I traced my route. I arrived at the subdivision gate at 6:35. I said, typing the time into a spreadsheet. I parked at 6:40. I was inside by 6:42, and the transaction Darla asked. 6:45, I said. 3 minutes later. I pulled up Maddie's social media page. She blocked me years ago, but I have a secondary account with a fake name that I use to see photos of my son. I scrolled to her Christmas Eve album. It was titled Winter Wonderland in Briar Hollow. There was a photo of the group toasting with champagne. I zoomed in. Maddie was holding a crystal flute. On her wrist was a silver charm bracelet. It was distinct, with a heavy heart-shaped clasp. I cross-referenced it with the inventory of the Gilded Bow online. It was the exact item listed on the receipt I found in the trash. I looked at the timestamp of the post. Darla, I said, my breath catching in my throat. She posted the photo at 6:30 in the evening. So the transaction at the store was time-stamped 6:45, I said. She was wearing the bracelet 15 minutes before she allegedly bought it, which means she didn't buy it then, Darla said, her voice dropping. She bought it earlier. Or stole it earlier. And the transaction at 6:45 was manually keyed in. I finished the thought. Or she ran the card later to make it look like I was the one shopping, but the photo proves she had possession of the merchandise before I even walked through the door. They were sloppy. Arrogance makes people sloppy. They thought I was just an old woman who would cry and accept their version of reality. They forgot that I spent 40 years catching people who tried to cheat on insurance claims. I was about to screenshot the image when my phone rang. It was a blocked number. I hesitated, then pressed answer. This is Eleanor Hart. I said, Ms. Hart, a woman's voice said. It was professional, detached, and utterly terrifying. I am calling from the County Probate Court. Mental Health Division. We have received an urgent referral regarding your capacity evaluation. I gripped the phone. I have not requested an evaluation, I said. We know, the woman replied. But given the nature of the petition filed regarding your safety, the court is requiring a confirmation of your current location. We need to know if you are currently alone, Ms. Hart. There is concern you may be a danger to yourself. The game had officially moved from the kitchen to the courtroom. I am perfectly fine, I said, forcing my voice to remain calm despite the rage boiling in my blood. And I will be bringing my own evidence to the hearing. I hung up before she could ask another question. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was done being the victim. If they wanted to question my mind, I would show them exactly how sharp it still was. The phone call from Martin came while I was sitting in the parking lot of a walk-in clinic on the south side of town. He spoke fast, his voice tight with urgency. They filed the affidavit. Eleanor, Martin said. They are claiming you have a history of wandering off and forgetting where you are. They submitted the text messages as proof of cognitive decline. You need that medical clearance, and you need it today. I walked into the clinic with my heart hammering against my ribs. I did not go to my usual doctor. Caleb was the emergency contact on that file. I chose a place where no one knew my name. I sat through an hour of cognitive tests. I repeated lists of words. I drew clock faces. I counted backward from 100 by sevens. The doctor, a young woman with tired eyes, signed the form. You are as sharp as a tack. Ms. Hart. Why did you need this for insurance? I lied. As I was putting on my coat, the receptionist smiled at me. Oh, by the way, your daughter-in-law called just before you arrived. She wanted to make sure you found the place okay. Such a sweet girl. My blood ran cold. I had not told Caleb or Maddie where I was going. They were tracking my phone. I drove straight to the bank, looking in my rearview mirror every few seconds. I felt hunted. I sat in the manager's office and executed the plan Martin and I had drafted. We moved every cent of my life savings, my retirement, the insurance payout from my husband, the emergency fund into the new trust account. It was invisible. It was locked. Then, I transferred $3,000 back into my old checking account. It was a pathetic amount compared to what was there before, but it looked believable. It looked like the scraps of an old woman's life. Leave the account active, I told the teller, and reset the password to this. I wrote down a string of characters. Simple. Guessable. I texted Caleb from the car. I am confused and scared. Can you meet me at Stone and Oak? Please come alone. When I walked into the coffee shop an hour later, I made sure my hair was slightly disheveled. I wore my oldest sweater. I sat hunched over a cup of herbal tea, staring at the table. Caleb came in first. He looked exhausted. When he saw me, his shoulders dropped. Mom, he said, sitting down and reaching for my hand. His palm was warm, and for a second, I wanted to cry. You look terrible. I don't know what is happening to me. Caleb, I whispered, letting my voice tremble. The money, the texts. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am forgetting things. Caleb squeezed my hand. It's okay, Mum. We just want you to be safe. We can fix this. The bell above the door chimed. The air in the cafe seemed to drop 10 degrees. Maddie walked in. She was wearing a structured beige coat and carrying a designer bag. She did not look tired. She looked like a general arriving to accept a surrender. Caleb pulled his hand away from mine instantly. He sat up straighter, his face hardening into a mask of indifference. It was like watching a puppet being jerked by invisible strings. Eleanor, Maddie said, sitting next to Caleb without taking off her sunglasses. Caleb says you are ready to listen to reason. I just want the fighting to stop, I said, looking down at my tea. We have a solution, Maddie said, placing her phone on the table. Caleb will take over the power of attorney for your finances. We will sell your apartment. There is a nice assisted living complex 10 minutes from our house. You will be close to us. We can monitor you. It sounded like a death sentence wrapped in velvet. I suppose that makes sense. I stammered. I just worry about the bills. I wanted to check my balance, but I tapped my phone screen aggressively, feigning incompetence. I can't get this app to work. My eyes are so bad today. Maddie sighed, an impatient sound that grated on my nerves. Here, she said, holding out her hand. Give it to me. Can you just log in for me? I asked, pushing a slip of paper with the new, simple password across the table. Just to make sure the electric bill cleared, I don't want to lose the lights. Maddie snatched the paper. She pulled out her own phone, the latest model, sleek and expensive. She typed in my username. She typed in the password. It is fine. Eleanor, she said after a moment. turning the screen to show me the $3,000. The balance is there. You have nothing to worry about. Caleb will handle everything from now on. She did not log out. I saw her swipe the app closed. But she did not hit the sign out button. She saved the credentials. Thank you, I said, wiping a fake tear from my cheek. You are so good to help me. I went home and sat in the dark. I watched the clock on the wall tick past 7, then 8, then 9. At 9:45, my laptop screen lit up. The security software Martin had installed pinged with a silent alert. Unauthorized access detected. Device iPhone 14 Pro. Network residential Wi-Fi. Service provider Comcast. Location: Briar Hollow subdivision. I stared at the screen. They were not waiting for the court order. They were not waiting for me to sign the papers. Maddie was logging in from her couch, likely with a glass of wine in her hand, coming to take the rest of what she thought I had. I took a screenshot. Got you, I whispered. The morning after the unauthorized login. Martin Hale moved with the precision of a surgeon. He filed an emergency motion for protection with the county court, attaching the raw server logs from the bank. The digital trail was not subtle. It was a neon line connecting the withdrawals directly to the IP address assigned to my son's router in Briar Hollow. We have the location. Eleanor, Martin said, tapping the stack of papers on his desk. But we need the intent. Theft is one thing. Conspiracy is another. We need to know exactly who set up the infrastructure. That answer came 2 hours later from Darla. She had called in a favor with a clerk at the Secretary of State's office to pull the articles of incorporation for the mysterious entity attached to the post office box. Mary Vale Consulting, LLC, Darla said over the speakerphone, her voice tight. It sounds like a candle shop, but it is registered as a financial management firm. It was formed 3 weeks ago. Who is the registered agent? I asked. I was gripping the edge of Martin's mahogany desk so hard my knuckles were white. I am looking at the signature on the filing right now, Darla said. There was a pause, a silence so heavy it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Eleanor. It is not Madeline. Martin slid a faxed copy of the document across the desk toward me. I looked at the bottom line. The signature was looped and rushed, the C crossing over the H in a way I had seen on report cards, permission slips, and birthday cards for 30 years. It is Caleb, I whispered. The room spun. I had prepared myself for Maddie's greed. I had told myself that Caleb was just weak, a man beaten down by a demanding wife, nodding along to keep the peace. But you do not accidentally form a limited liability company. You do not accidentally rent a commercial mailbox to divert your mother's bank statements. He signed it. I said, my voice breaking. He knew, the whole time. Memories I had dismissed as innocent suddenly sharpened into focus. 2 years ago. Caleb had asked for my social security number, claiming he could get me a discount on his company's family insurance plan. Last summer, he had borrowed my driver's license to scan it for a rental car application when we went on a day trip. He had been gathering the keys to my identity piece by piece, like a squirrel hoarding nuts for a long, cold winter. Martin leaned forward, his expression grave. This complicates things, Eleanor, but it also gives us leverage. If Caleb is the legal owner of the shell company, he is the one on the hook for wire fraud. Maddie might be the architect, but she made sure your son is the one holding the bag. I need to look him in the eye, I said. I need to know if he understands what he has done. Martin nodded. Then we set the stage. We invite them over. We tell them you are ready to surrender. We tell them you want to sign everything over to Caleb to avoid the court hearing. We make them feel safe. A settlement conference, I said. A mediation, Martin corrected. But we will have a court-certified stenographer in the bedroom with the door cracked. And we will have the recording devices running. In this state, as long as one party consents to the recording, it is admissible. You are the consenting party. I went home and made the call. It was the 30th of December, the day before New Year's Eve. Maddie answered on the first ring. "Eleanor," she chirped. "We were just talking about you. How are you feeling?" "I am tired." "Maddie," I said, letting a tremor enter my voice. "I do not want to go to court. I do not want strangers looking at my life. I just want it to be over. If Caleb comes over tonight, I will sign the papers. I will transfer the house. Just promise me you will take care of me." "Oh, Eleanor." "Thank God," Maddie said, her voice dropping to a soothing, patronizing coo. "That is the best decision. We just want to help. We will come over at 7. Is it okay if we bring a friend? He is a financial advisor. He can help with the notary work, so we do not have to wait." "A financial advisor? On the 30th of December at 7 at night? That sounds fine," I said. "Bring whoever you need." I hung up. I stood in the center of my living room. I had vacuumed the rug. I had set out a plate of store-bought cookies. It looked like a grandmother's house. It was a courtroom. I walked over to the bookshelf and picked up the framed photo of Caleb from his 5th grade graduation. He was smiling, his arm around my waist, looking at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. I ran my thumb over the glass. "Tonight," I whispered to the boy who no longer existed, "I will find out if you are the victim or the accomplice." The air in my living room was thick enough to choke on. I had arranged the paperwork on the coffee table like a fan of playing cards. To the untrained eye, they looked like the surrender of a lifetime deeds, transfer forms, power of attorney documents. In reality, they were photocopies of old drafts, meaningless and void, while the real assets sat safely in Martin's vault. Darla was sitting in the corner armchair, nursing a cup of Earl Grey. Her presence was the variable Maddie had not calculated. We had staged it perfectly. Darla had dropped by 10 minutes before 7 to return a casserole dish and decided to stay for tea. Maddie could not kick out a neighbour without breaking her mask of benevolence. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Maddie swept in first, smelling of cold air and expensive perfume. Caleb followed, dragging his feet like a man walking to the gallows. Behind them was a man I did not know, a slick character in a suit that was a little too shiny, carrying a leather briefcase. "Eleanor," Maddie said, ignoring Darla with practiced ease. "This is Mr. Vance. He is helping us with the transition. He is very discreet. Mr. Vance smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "Pleasure? Mrs. Hart. I understand we are looking to expedite the asset protection tonight." I gestured to the sofa. "Please, sit." Caleb sat on the edge of the cushion, his face the color of old parchment. He refused to look at me. He refused to look at the papers. He just stared at his knees. "Let's get this over with," Maddie said, picking up a pen and holding it out to me. "Sign the authorization first. Mum. It just gives Caleb the right to manage the daily bills. It will take all the stress off your shoulders. We can worry about the house deed later." I looked at the pen. Then I looked at Maddie. "Before I sign, I said, my voice soft but steady. I want to ask about Christmas Eve one last time. The $350. Maddie let out a sharp, exasperated breath. She looked at Mr. Vance and rolled her eyes. We are not doing this again, she snapped. Eleanor, you are confused. You are mixing up dreams with reality. It is a symptom of your condition. That is why we are here. My condition, I repeated. I reached for my phone, which was connected to a small Bluetooth speaker on the side table. I pressed play. A sharp, digital chime filled the room, the recording of my bank notification alert. That sound, I said. That is the sound my phone made at 6:45 on Christmas Eve. It was in my coat pocket. In your closet. I paused. And this? I said, pressing play again. This time, it was the muffled sound of a closet door opening, followed by the rustle of fabric. And then, faint but distinct, Maddie's voice humming. Silent night. Maddie went rigid. Her eyes darted to the speaker, then to me. I have a voice-activated recorder on my phone. Maddie. I lied. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. I turned it on before I walked into your house. It recorded you opening my purse. That is illegal. Mr. Vance interjected quickly. You cannot record people without consent in a private residence. Actually, Darla spoke up from the corner, sipping her tea. You can if the recording device is on your own person, and you are a party to the conversation. Or, in this case, the theft. It is not theft, Maddie hissed, her mask cracking. She is senile. She doesn't know what she is doing. Vance leaned forward, trying to regain control. Mrs. Hart, please. We are talking about the Chase Manhattan accounts. Correct. If we do not secure those funds tonight, the tax implications for the coming year could be disastrous. I froze. I looked at him. I do not have a Chase Manhattan account, I said. Mr. Vance blinked. He faltered. Well, the file indicated. The file you stole from my desk, I asked. The old one from 5 years ago, I closed that account in 2020. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Vance had just proven he had seen documents that were never given to him. Caleb made a sound, a choked, strangulated noise. Stop, he whispered. Caleb Maddie warned, her hand gripping his knee hard enough to bruise. I said stop. Caleb shouted. He stood up, his hands shaking violently. He looked at Maddie, his eyes wide with panic. You said it would be simple, Maddie. You said just a few small amounts to pay off the credit cards. You said she wouldn't notice Maddie's face drained of colour. She stood up and slapped him a hard, sharp crack that echoed in the small room. Shut up, she screamed. You idiot. You weak, pathetic idiot. I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs. It was not just greed. It was desperation. Credit cards, I said, looking at my son. You are in debt. Caleb sank back onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. We are maxed out. Mom, everything. The house, the cars, the trips. Maddie said. She said if we just borrowed a little from you, we could float it until my bonus came. But then she said we needed more. She said you didn't need it. She said you were just hoarding it. So you decided to declare me incompetent. I said, the realization cold and heavy in my gut. You decided to bury me alive so you could use my life savings to pay for your lifestyle. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Caleb sobbed. Maddie was standing over him, her chest heaving. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. There was no more daughter-in-law left. There was only a cornered animal. He's lying. Maddie spat. He is the one who spent the money. I tried to stop him. Is that so? I asked. I stood up. I picked up the pen Maddie had tried to force into my hand. Okay, I said. I will sign. Maddie blinked, confused by the sudden pivot. What, I will sign the papers? I said. I will give you what you want. But I have one condition. I pointed the pen at her. Unlock your phone. Madeline. Right now. And let me see the text messages between you and this financial advisor of yours. The room went dead still. Mr. Vance reached for his briefcase, his eyes darting to the door. Maddie took a step back, her hand instinctively covering her pocket. Show me the phone, I said, my voice hard as iron, or I call the police and play them the rest of that tape. Maddie snatched her phone back, hiding it behind the silk of her blouse. She stepped back, putting Caleb between us like a human shield. Stay back, Maddie screamed, her voice pitching up an octave, loud enough for the neighbours to hear through the thin apartment walls. Caleb. She is attacking me. She is having an episode. Get her away from me. I stood perfectly still. I saw the way she held the device behind her back. The camera lens was peeking out from behind her hip, angled upward. She was recording. She wanted a clip of the crazy mother-in-law lunging at her, a 30-second video to play for a judge to secure that guardianship. You can stop the performance. Madeline, I said, my voice calm and low. Darla is sitting right there. There is a witness in the room. Maddie's eyes darted to Darla, then back to me. A vein throbbed in her neck. She stepped around Caleb, moving closer to me, invading my personal space. You are pathetic, she hissed, low enough that the recording might not pick it up, but loud enough for me to feel her spit. You are a lonely, bitter old woman who... I ignored her. I looked past her shoulder at my son. I picked up the single most dangerous piece of paper from the coffee table. It was the Articles of Organization for the Shell Company. Caleb, I said, look at this. I held the paper up. Merryvale Consulting, LLC. I read aloud. Registered Agent Caleb Hart. Signature dated December 10th. Caleb blinked, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at the document, then at Maddie. I don't know what that is. He stammered. You signed it, I said. It is your signature. Did you know you were opening a shell company to funnel stolen funds? Or did you just sign where she told you to sign? Caleb's face crumbled. He looked at his wife with a mixture of horror and confusion. You said... Caleb's voice cracked. Maddie, you said those were tax forms. You said it was for the deductions for the business. He is lying. Maddie shrieked, her composure shattering. He did it. He is the one with the debt. Do not look at me like that. I signed them because I trusted you? Caleb shouted, his voice breaking into a sob. I didn't read them because I was ashamed of the credit card bills. I just wanted it fixed. And your solution was to rob your mother. I said. Maddie snapped. The realization that her legal shield, my son, was folding caused her to lose all control. She lunged. She did not scream this time. She just moved. She scrambled over the coffee table, scattering the papers, her fingernails clawing for the document in my hand. Give me that, she yelled. Maddie, stop, Caleb shouted, reaching for her. He was too slow. Maddie grabbed my wrist. She shoved me. It was a hard, desperate push against my chest. I stumbled back, My heel caught the edge of the rug. I went down hard. My hip slammed against the hardwood floor with a sickening thud. The breath left my lungs in a sharp gasp. For a second, the room was silent. Caleb stood frozen, his hands hovering in the air. Maddie stood over me, panting, the paper ripped in half in her hand. I did not try to get up. I did not cry out. I looked at the phone on the side table, just within reach. I crawled to it. My hip throbbed, a hot, searing pain. But my mind was ice. I picked up the receiver. I dialed 911. "Eleanor." "Don't," Caleb whispered, his face pale as a sheet. 911. "What is your emergency?" the operator asked. "I need police at 124 Oak Street, apartment 4B, I said into the phone, my eyes locked on Maddie. "My daughter-in-law has just physically assaulted me. I am 58 years old. I am on the floor and I cannot get up." Maddie dropped the torn paper. She stepped back, her hands flying to her mouth. She looked at Caleb, waiting for him to fix it, waiting for him to take the phone from me. But Caleb did not move. He looked at his wife. Then he looked down at me, sprawled on the floor of the home he grew up in. "Caleb," Maddie hissed, "do something." "She is faking it." Caleb stared at me. He saw the red mark forming on my wrist where she had grabbed me. He saw the way I was clutching my hip. "She is not faking it," Caleb whispered. 10 minutes later, the apartment was filled with uniformed officers. A paramedic was checking my vitals in the armchair. Maddie was in the kitchen with 2 officers, crying loud, theatrical, heaving sobs, claiming I had attacked her first. But Darla had already given her statement. The recording on my phone had been played. An officer walked over to Caleb. "Sir, we are going to need you to step outside. We are placing your wife under arrest for domestic battery against an elderly person." Maddie looked up as the handcuffs clicked. Her mascara was running. She looked at Caleb as they led her past him. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a terrifying, desperate whisper. "Don't," she hissed. "Don't you dare betray me. Caleb, you signed those papers too. If I go down, you go down. Fix this." The door closed behind them. The room was quiet again, save for the crackle of the police radio. Caleb stood in the center of the room. He looked at the empty doorway. Then he turned slowly to look at me. His eyes were wide. For the first time in his life, he wasn't looking at me with annoyance or pity. He was looking at me with fear. And he was looking at himself with something far worse. "Mum," he started, his voice trembling. "Sit down." "Caleb?" I said, adjusting the ice pack on my hip. "The police are not done with us yet, and neither am I." The police station was a blur of fluorescent lights and ringing phones, but my mind was as clear as ice water. Martin sat beside me, laying out the digital evidence like a royal flush. The bank logs from the honeypot account were irrefutable. The unauthorized login at 9:45 had come from the Wi-Fi network at Briar Hollow, specifically from a device with a MAC address matching Madeline's phone. Then came the second blow. A detective walked in holding a file on Mr. Vance, the so-called financial advisor. "His real name is Gary Sines," the officer said, tossing the folder onto the metal table. "He is not an advisor. He is a 2-bit con artist with outstanding warrants in Ohio for check kiting. Your daughter-in-law did not find him at a firm. She found him on a dark web forum for credit washing." Maddie was sitting in the holding cell, still shouting about her rights. But her screams were getting quieter, drowned out by the weight of the paper trail Martin was handing over. We had the fake guardianship petition, the change of address form for my mail, and the registration for Merivale Consulting LLC. The judge on duty took one look at the package Martin presented and signed an immediate dismissal of the guardianship application. In its place, he opened a formal investigation into conspiracy and financial elder abuse. I asked to see my son. They brought Caleb into the interview room. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. His tie was undone, and his face was grey. He sat down across from me, unable to meet my eyes. "I didn't know about the guy," Caleb whispered, his voice shaking. "I swear, Mom," Maddie just said. "She said he was a friend who could help us restructure the debt. I didn't know he was a criminal." "And the LLC?" I asked. "You signed the papers? Caleb? You opened a shell company to funnel money out of my accounts." "I thought it was for tax write-offs," Caleb pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "Maddie said we could move some of your assets around to lower the tax burden, use it to pay off the credit cards, and then pay you back when my bonus came in." I told myself it was borrowing. I never thought. "You never thought what I cut him off. You never thought I would fight back. You stood there on Christmas Eve and watched her gaslight me. You watched her treat me like a senile invalid because it was easier than admitting you are broke." Caleb put his head in his hands. "She told me she would leave me. Mom," she said I was a failure. She said if I didn't fix the money situation, she would divorce me and take the house and ruin my reputation at work. I was scared. I was so scared of losing everything that you decided to sacrifice me instead." I finished. The room went silent. The truth hung between us, ugly and undeniable. He had not hated me. He had just valued his own comfort more than my life. "You have a choice right now." "Caleb," I said, leaning forward. "The police are charging Maddie with identity theft, forgery, and battery. Gary is going down for fraud. You are the registered agent of the company they used. You are an accessory." Caleb looked up, terrified. "I will go to jail," he choked out. "Unless you talk," I said. "You tell them everything. You tell them Maddie orchestrated the mail redirect. You tell them she planted the text messages. You testify against her. If you do that, Martin can argue that you were coerced and manipulated. You might lose your job. You will definitely lose your wife. But you might stay out of prison." Caleb nodded. A broken, jerky motion. "I will do it. I will tell them." I stood up to leave. My hip was aching, and I was exhausted. But I had one last thing to say. "There is something you should know," I said, putting my hand on the doorknob. "You didn't steal my life savings tonight. Caleb?" He blinked, confused. "What?" "The money in that account," I said. "The $3,000 she showed me, that was all there was. I moved everything else, the house deed, the retirement fund, the insurance payout into an irrevocable trust days ago. The money you guys were trying to steal tonight? It was just bait." Caleb stared at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He realized then that if I had not set the trap, if I had not moved the money, he would have eventually stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars. He would have committed a felony that would have put him away for 20 years. You saved me," he whispered. "You stopped me from doing the one thing I couldn't come back from. I didn't do it for you," I said quietly. "I did it for me. Because I am done being the victim in your story." I walked out of the interrogation room. I watched through the one-way glass as Maddie was processed. She was stripped of her jewelry, her designer coat, and her phone. She looked small and angry and pathetic. She had bet everything on the idea that I was weak. She lost. I signed the paperwork for a temporary restraining order against both of them. I instructed Martin to file a civil suit to recover the legal fees and damages. I was not going to pay a cent for my own defense. I walked out of the police station. It was early morning. The sun was just beginning to bleed over the horizon, painting the snow in shades of pink and grey. The air was biting cold, but it felt clean. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline leaving my body. I buttoned my cheap wool coat and walked to my car. I was alone. I had no son to call, no family dinner to go to, but for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like freedom. I had drawn a line in the snow, and I had defended it. I was Eleanor Hart, and I was nobody's victim. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop your city or country in the comments below if you enjoyed this story. Please hit that like button, subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, and smash the hype button to help us share these stories with more people.